Well, I'm now joined live by global market analyst Patrick Young, who will no doubt have plenty to say on the controversial bailout plan. Patrick, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, this levy will be painful for many to swallow, but surely it's in the interests, isn't it, for everyone? Better to live with a little less money now than walk around in a bankrupt state, surely.
Of course, it's always going to be better to be living in a state that's solvent and not bankrupt. But I think the question that must be on the lips of every single Cypriot saver today is the idea of why do they have to pay and why do the bondholders not have to pay? That is what is inherently so physically wrong with this deal as proposed. You see, bonds, government debt, and so on, those people are investors. They take a risk. Ultimately, it should be a relatively safe investment, but in this case, it's all gone horribly wrong. What is appalling about this particular instance is that the European Union, the Eurozone, have taken a step forward beyond their previous policy where they always said individuals will not be harmed. We will not take money out of the mouths of pensioners. And actually, they've done that. They're stealing money from pensioners, from savers, in order to support bondholders, which of course is the great hypocritical irony of this, because essentially you've got nations like Germany turning around and saying, Cyprus must pay for its outrageous activity in the course of recent years fiscally, when actually what the Germans also want to do is support their own banks who hold these bonds. That is what is entirely immoral, unreasonable, and is ultimately a potential tipping point for the entire Eurozone between safety and panic.
And obviously, the Cypriots are unhappy, but is there a danger that they could be slapped in the face twice? Could this lead to further austerity? Could this be the tip of the iceberg?
Oh, this is an appalling situation for the Cypriots, because essentially what the Cypriots have been told is that if you're lucky, you got a leaky lifeboat in order to manage to escape the Titanic. But other than that, nobody's coming to your rescue. Nobody's really going to try and help you out. What we're going to do is we're going to try and make sure that the good ship Euro ultimately sails on entirely safely. So yes, it's a horrible situation. In any case, there's already de facto austerity taking place in this measure. You cannot take 3%, 5%, 10% out of the savings of either Cypriot individuals or indeed Cypriot small businesses and expect them to be able to just take it on the chin. There is a horrible economic climate in the southeast Mediterranean. The origins of Cyprus's problems come from their big brother next door, Greece, and we all know how terrible the situation is there. So is more austerity coming? Absolutely. It's not going to end here, but ultimately the Cypriots have been left with essentially a loaded revolver with all 6 barrels full and being told to go and play Russian roulette.
You mentioned there the individual Cypriots and the small businesses as well, but it's non-residents who could get by hit too as well, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And actually, this is a very, very worrying precedent, because the Eurozone and the European Union have looked at the overall Cyprus situation and said a huge swathe of deposits here come from people outside the European Union. And whether they've done it entirely cynically or whether they've done it entirely consciously, we can never be absolutely clear. But there certainly looks to me to be a lot of politics behind this move. Essentially, the Eurozone, the European Union have said, who can we manage to take a haircut from that are actually not our citizens, not our voters, or not our beleaguered banks who are largely incompetent? That also is a terrible precedent to set, because ultimately, any banking system is reliant upon foreign deposits, and all foreigners, whether they're Russian corporates, Russian oligarchs, or whoever they are, it matters not one iota, because the whole point is that from today on, people will be aware that there is a precedent for burning investors who want to hold the euro. And that is not good for the status of the euro, for the status of the Eurozone, and indeed for any bank in the European Union that has foreign deposits.
You mentioned there Russian investors. President Putin has condemned the deal, saying it's not good news for Russian investors. If Russian cash flows away from Cyprus, what repercussions could that have for the entire European economy?
Well, look, what we're seeing here is the idea that President Putin is absolutely correct. I mean, what he's seeing from his perspective is essentially there has been a smash and grab armed robbery over the weekend by a group of people based in Brussels and around the Eurozone who've decided to steal money from Russian citizens, Russian businesses, and so on. What is that going to mean? First of all, obviously, these people are going to lose money, so they're going to have less money to invest. That's a problem. That's a huge problem, whether you're a boutique in Knightsbridge in London, which enjoys the fortunes of oligarchs, whether you're potentially one of the many football teams or sports franchises they own within the European Union. But ultimately, for business per se, it's a very bad sign, because right now in Moscow, people are going to be looking at where are the safe places to place their funds. Ironically, one of the safe places may well be to repatriate back to Moscow. The Moscow Financial Centre, huge amounts of money being spent, very, very state-of-the-art Anglo-Saxon style legal system being set up. Perhaps ultimately that's where the money's going to go. But it is going to flow out of Cyprus. Of that I have little or no doubt.
Patrick, thank you very much for your time. Global markets analyst Patrick Young here on RT. Thank you very much.